And so tonight's book that I'm going to teach you, sort of lecture and read from and just ask questions and just have some fun with, is his most outlandish book. It's called Beware of God. Okay? Now, Beware of God, if you look at just at the photo, the reason why I photocopied it is because, what's the image on the front? Right? It's a dog. Right? So the word God and dog, you just interplace the two letters, right? So it's Beware of Dog, Beware of God. His other books include, he wrote a book called Running with Scissors, which was about being gay as a young Jewish boy. They made a movie out of that. And then he wrote another book called The Foreskin's Dilemma, which is after he had his first child, of whether or not he was going to circumcise his son. Okay? In between those books, he wrote this one. And it's a collection of short stories. Okay? Yes, he did in the end. But the whole point is it's all about his sort of almost like Portnoy's complaint version of whether he should circumcise his son. Okay? So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to read. I gave you 3 stories. I thought we'd spend about 15, 20 minutes on each story and then call it a night. Because it's just so fun. I don't want to give it away because I want you to, if you want, to buy the book. So I only did 3 stories out of it. If you want to buy the book, you can get it on Amazon. It's right here. I'll leave it up here. At the end, you can come up and take a closer look at it. The stories we're going to do tonight, the first one is called God is a Big Happy Chicken. I think the second story we chose is, if I remember correctly, is Metamorphosis. Oh no, it ain't easy being supreme, which is a really interesting story. And the last one is, if I remember, is the Metamorphosis, which is based on Kafka. So those are the three stories we're choosing. But let me just read you the other stories in the table of contents again to sort of give you a little flavor of where he's going with this. And then I'm just going to read. And you can stop me while we're reading and remark and, give your own commentary. And then we'll discuss some of the themes in each one of the stories, okay? So the first story is called The War of the Bernsteins. The second one, which is a war about an inter-family Jewish dialogue about a family that, surprise, surprise, doesn't totally get along with each other, okay? The next one's called Bobo, the Self-Hating Chimp. So what happens if a chimpanzee in a zoo becomes self-aware and takes on sort of this existentialist Sartre personality? There's one story called Somebody Up There Likes You. There's a story called Hamish Knows All. There's a story called Holocaust Tips for Kids, very irreverent story about the Holocaust. There's a story called Waiting for Joe, which is his version of Waiting for Godot. There's a story called Startling Revelations from the Lost Book of Stan, a book on Stan, like the prophet's name is Stan. One Death to Go, The Metamorphosis, Prophet's Dilemma, They're All the Same, Smite the Heathens, Charlie Brown. This is right after Charles Schulz passed away, so he wrote a comic strip. He didn't actually do the drawing, but he wrote the script for a Charlie Brown comic strip. God is a Big Happy Chicken, and It Ain't Easy Being Supreme. So I'm going to leave this up here, little reading rainbow style. You have a chance to read it. I mean, even if you look at his picture, he looks a little angry in his picture. So you got to take him with a big grain of salt, but it's just to have some fun on a summer evening, okay? So does everyone have a packet? All right. I'm going to read it, and raise your hand if you want me to stop and ask me questions, okay? That's on page 165 in this book. If you have, make sure you're with me, okay? God is a Big Happy Chicken. When Yankel Morgenstern died and went to heaven, he was surprised to discover that God was a large chicken. The chicken was around 30 feet tall and spoke perfect English. He stood before a gleaming eternal coop of gold made of chicken wire and shimmering bronze, and behold, inside a nest of diamonds. I'm not going to use the curse words. I'll let you. Shoot, said Morgenstern. You know, said Chicken, that's the first thing everyone says when they meet me. Shoot, how does that make me feel? Morgenstern threw himself at Chicken's feet, kissing his enormous holy claws. Now, you should know who Morgenstern is, right? You don't know from the beginning of the story, but his reverence towards God probably tells you, and if you know who Shalom Auslander was, who's he writing about? He's writing about some Yid from the Crown Heights community who probably is very halakhically stringently Jewish and dies and goes to heaven and finds out that God is a chicken. Okay? So then Morgenstern says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one." Morgenstern cried out. Chicken stepped backward and shrugged. "Eh?" he said, bobbing his enormous head. "What?" said Morgenstern. "What's that supposed to do for me, Hear, O Israel?" he asked. "How's it again?" asked Chicken. It's the Shema," Morgenstern said with hesitation. Chicken stomped around in a circle before settling down in his holy nests of nests. "Yeah," he said, "I know. I've been hearing it for years. Still not sure what it means, though, Hear, O Israel." "Not Hear, O Israel," snapped Morgenstern. He stood up, clutching his black felt hat in his hand. "Hear, O Israel. It means that you are one, that you are the only one, God." That last word didn't come easily. "Of course I am," said Chicken. "Do you see any other chickens around here?" Morgenstern thought of his wife and children down on earth praying uselessly to a non-foul deity that didn't exist. He thought of all the chicken he'd eaten, breasts, thighs, giblets, nuggets, so many omelets, Western, Spanish, California. Dear God, it was true that in a few months before his death, he switched from free range, but would that earn a chicken's mercy? He thought of fast food industry, of KFC, of the horrible retribution spicy chicken wings would surely bring upon all of mankind. Hey, Gabe. Gabe called the chicken. "Is it Hear, O Israel, or Hear, O Israel?" A stocky old man appeared from the clouds. He wore a pair of dirty Carhartt overalls and smoked a cigarette. It's Hear, O Israel, sir. You are quite correct." He turned his head sharply towards Morgenstern. "Morgenstern? Yes? Follow me." Morgenstern bowed to the large chicken and walked backward from him in a show of deference and respect, which if you see from Jews in shul, they'll often walk backwards from the Arona Kodesh, right? So he's very sort of doing that. Okay? But when he looked up, Chicken was already beak deep in his golden bowl of feed. Morgenstern felt dizzy. This is all too much. Was that really? Gabe nodded. "But the Bible," said Morgenstern. Don't worry about the Bible," said Gabe. "We've got the Joker who wrote that thing down in hell, Gabe," he said, extending his hand to Morgenstern as they walked through the nothingness toward the nowhere. As in Gabriel, right? Gavriel? "I expected you to be more, Jewish?" "I suppose," answered Morgenstern. "Asians all think I'd be Asian. Black folks all think I'd be black. It's a funny world. I'm sort of the head ranch hand around here. I make sure Chicken has enough feed and water. I clean his coop, general maintenance." Couldn't the chicken just create his own food? Not the chicken, just Chicken. And no, he can't create his own food. He's a chicken. By the way, this is the same conversation you have about God. You don't say, "Oh, the God." It's just God, right? So it's, again, he knows the Jewish language, right? He's totally just playing with the Jew. Morgenstern asked Gabe where he was taking him. "Nowhere. That is what we do here. Wherever you go, there you are." Right, who's he quoting there? Wherever you go, there you are? No. Is it Dr. Seuss or is it like Bob Dylan? Oh. It's from the 60s. Isn't it from the 60s? Yeah. "Hey, Christ," cried Morgenstern. "You're a Buddhist. I knew it. God is a Buddhist. Damn. I knew the Buddhists were always right, always so happy and peaceful." "He's not a Buddhist," interrupted Gabe. He paused to light a cigarette. Marlboro Reds. "He's a chicken." "I need to go back to Earth," Morgenstern blurted out. "Earth? Why?" Morgenstern turned his face to Gabe. "Let me tell them, Gabe. Please, let me tell my family, just my family, Gabe. He's a chicken. Not Hashem, not Adonai. Oh, the years I wasted. Let me tell him so that they don't have to jump through the hoops I did trying to please some maniacal father who are in heaven. 9 children, Gabe. 9 full, happy, worry-free lives. Let them drive on Saturday. Let them eat bacon. Let them get the lunch special at Red Lobster. McDonald's, Gabe. Do you have any of those fries up here, do you? What does a hamburger with cheese taste like? Is anal sex all it's cracked up to be? Please, Gabe. They can have abs. They can drive Camaros. They can watch television on Friday night. I never saw an episode of Miami Vice, Gabe. Never. Mine was no life. I was raised like a veal, not chosen. Just people. Oh, what freedom. Please, let me tell them, Gabe. Gabe took a long drag from his cigarette and shook his head. They won't listen, he said. I've tried telling a few myself, but you want to go back to Earth? Go back to Earth. Morgenstern hugged Gabe tightly. Don't you have to clear it with the chicken? Not the chicken, said Gabe. Just chicken. And no, I don't. Chicken doesn't care either way. He flicked his cigarette butt off to the side. He gets his feed filled in the morning and his droppings cleaned in the afternoon, and that's all. He really wants to know. I'll see you in a couple of years. Hey, a voice from below called upward. Watch where you flick your butts. Well, well, Gabe shouted, if it isn't Mr. Bible Writer. I said I was sorry, the man shouted back, and when Gabe looked up, Morgenstern was gone. So let's pause there for a minute, okay? There's a lot going on there, right? So who is Morgenstern? Now that we know more about him, how many kids does he have? 9. So what kind of family is this? Quite froom, right? Quite froom. And how does, yeah, please. Oh, because he can say it now. So I think the point is that once he's in heaven, right? So what is in Auslander's understanding, what is the froom personality? It is encumbered all the time with chosenness. Because God chose you, you can't eat pork. Because God chose you, you can't drive on Shabbos. And you can't watch TV on Friday night. And you can't go to McDonald's. And you can't go on vacation. And you can't eat what you want to eat. And meet the people you want to meet. You have to drive a schleppy old car and you can't drive a sports car, right? All these kinds of things of that community. But once Morgenstern gets to heaven and realizes that God indeed is just a giant chicken, he's like, I'm going to do whatever I want. He's like, you got a cheeseburger? Give me a cheeseburger right now because it's not worth it, right? The entire linchpin of his theological understanding of the world has been completely decimated because God isn't the Kodesh Baruch Hu. God is an indifferent 30-foot tall chicken. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, yeah. Right, exactly right? Forget about it. It's just silly, right? In fact, he's the butt of jokes. No, sorry, no pun. But I intended that pun if people got that joke, right? Because he threw the cigarette butts at the Bible guy, right? He's the butt of jokes. Okay. Anyway, so that's what is Auslander, what is he saying about himself? Now, this is a little bit autobiographical, right? He's talking about that existence, right? This is, remember, he's the Rasha, right? So he's like bringing all that out. Okay, so yeah, go ahead.
So this guy isn't devout. He's not suffering with disappointment. It's about the rules.
Well, I think at first blush he was disappointed. He was like, Shema Yisrael, because he believed it, and then he's like, what do you mean? Where's Moshe Rabbeinu? He's in the basement. Yeah, but then he's like, well, if that is the reality, then I'm going to shave my beard, cut off my pants, I'm going to go get a cheeseburger, right? So what is Auslander saying about the devotion from Jews?
It's not very genuine.
Yeah, it's not totally genuine, right? It's just this thing, and there's just one keystone, and you move that keystone out of the way, and who the heck would choose to be Jewish? All right, yes, please. That's right.
And I'm not that religious in that way, but I like to think that people who are actually feel blessed to be that and not religious.
I would hope that is true, except that when you look at the halachic literature, it speaks of obligation. You are chayav. You are obligated to give tzedakah. You're obligated to refrain from eating chametz on Passover. You're obligated to keep Shabbat in a very strict manner. And the reason why you do those things is because God is a mitzaveh, a commander up in heaven. And in order to be a Jew, you have to follow the commander. And God has a list of commandments that you have to do. And when you fulfill a commandment in that world, does anyone know what that's called? You are yotzei that commandment. That the word is Hebrew is yotzei. Yotzei doesn't just mean to fulfill. To yotzei means to exit. It means you've checked off the box, to exit, to leave. It doesn't mean that you're left the religion. It just means I've now checked off that commandment for the day. Did you daven Shacharis this morning? Yes, I'm yotzei for Shacharis. I daven Shacharis. Did you say hamotzi before lunch? Yes, I'm yotzei for hamotzi. Did you bench after? Yes, I'm yotzei. I did those things, but the way they say it is you're a chayav until you do it, and then you are yotzei. So that means that God in heaven is a commander that creates checklists, to-do lists, and you have to do those things, and if you don't, what happens? Go to hell. Or you're not getting into heaven, or you're not being one with God, or you're not getting resurrected in the future time. All the different, whatever your version of the future world is, you're not getting there because you're not yotzei the commandment. That's Frumkeit Judaism. That's where that comes. That's what it is. It might not be a Judaism we're used to, but you got to know this is the Judaism he grew up with. And for Jews who live in that system, they still find meaning in it. So I don't want to denigrate it, but that is their hashkafa. That's how they see it. Yes? Uh-huh. I think it's gamze v'gamze, as I say in Hebrew. I think that some Jews, really many Jews who are in the system, love it and feel enraptured by it. In a postmodern world, it gives you solace and stability to know that to live a good life, this is the to-do list. And that you don't have to deal with outside world problems because it's all set out for you already. You know your kids are going to school. You know where they're going to go to college or not college if they're a girl. You know what small list of range of trades they're going to go into because all of them are in the same trades. And you know which one of 100 families their kids are going to marry into. All of those big existential questions of what it means to be free, you're liberated from all of that. Your path is set out because all you have to do is go to shul, keep Shabbos. If you're a girl, learn some Torah and some Nevi'im and some Midrash, and then when you get old enough, you're going to learn how to make a home, and then you're going to get married off by the time you're 17. That is their lives. And again, I'm not actually...
I'm sorry. It just seems like there's a very negative perspective.
This is not the way they live.
I'm talking about the ultra-Orthodox in Crown Heights. Yeah.
It sounds like so negative.
I'm not trying to be negative about it. I'm trying...
Kids, Rabbi, do you not have any rules for them?
Of course I have rules for them.
Oh, well, why is that? Are you a commander?
Actually, I am in some ways.
Why? God can't be a commander. What do you
I didn't say God isn't a commander. Again, the way that I'm describing it is actually, I think it's a very positive thing to be free of the difficulties of an open society. I think it's a very positive thing.
It wasn't just an open society. This is the way they lived for 2,000 years. So,
I don't totally agree with that. I think that Judaism in every culture in some ways creates itself. But my point is that it's the level and strength and bodyedness of a community of people who have come up, lived inside this narrative is quite strong. You're never without friends. Your Shabbos table is always full. If you get sick, you are taken care of. If someone else gets sick, you know you're obligated to take care of them. It's a very tight-knit community.
I have this fantasy that they love doing and being.
I think they do.
I wouldn't want it for me, but I have
Yeah.
this fantasy that they're over there very happy about it.
And I think that they do. But I don't think all of them do. If all of them did, we wouldn't have an author like Auslander, right? So I think that they do, but I don't think all of them do. I think some of them feel burdened and like, every once in a while I look over my shoulder and be like, it would be really nice to drive a fancy car. I'm never going to, but it's really not, I think people have those feelings, right? I haven't had a cheeseburger in 24 years. I've never had an In-N-Out. I heard it's awesome, right? So, but I've never had lobster in my life. I don't know if I'm missing anything. But the truth is that, sometimes I think about it. Sometimes I'd love to go to a restaurant and order whatever I wanted. But I've chosen this life, and I think that in an open society like America, everyone ends up choosing the life that they're in to some degree, not entirely. And so I think there's a lot of beauty in I was frum for a long time. I lived in the old city of Jerusalem. I participated in some of the most strident yeshivas in the world. I chose not to stay there, but I see beauty in it. To sing until midnight on Friday night because you're enraptured and in love with your tradition. To learn the Talmud at 3 o'clock in the morning with a Rabbi in the shadow of the Kotel. I personally didn't choose that life long term for myself. There's a lot of beauty in it, but there are also people who grew up in it for whom it chides them and they feel trapped. And so I think Morgenstern in this story is probably that type, because I think Auslander, he's clearly that type. So that's Rick. He grew up super frum.
Did he leave the community, or is
He still lives in Brooklyn. So he lives in the neighborhood next to the neighborhood where he grew up in, right? Close enough to see it, but far enough away that he's not in it. He lives in Park Slope. And that's one neighborhood over from Crown Heights in Williamsburg. Right? So he can still go visit his sisters and brothers and all of their kids, but then he goes back to his life in Park Slope. Right? Yeah.
Do you want to think about what he's like now? Has he completely left Judaism, or is he?
I think he still goes. I don't think he goes to Shul Shabbos. I don't think he keeps kosher. But I think he goes to Shul on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I think that if his in-laws, his brothers and sisters invite him for Shabbos dinner and he's available, he'll probably go because he probably loves his nieces and nephews. And he probably puts a kippah on when he's in their house because he doesn't want to upset them or his father or his mom. But the minute he's done, Shabbos morning, if his dad really wants him to come to shul because there's a yard site, he probably would go. He probably wouldn't daven, but he would sit there and say Kaddish maybe, and then he'd go out for cheeseburgers after shul was over. I think he's not. He's very disrespectful in the books, but he still has. We haven't read the end of the story. You have to read the end of the story. I don't want to give it away. So let me get to the end of the story, and then we can talk more about. Yeah.
The cheeseburger comment reminds me of something somebody said to me once.
Yeah.
I don't eat groceries, so I eat all kinds of things. And the guy said to me once, he said, for you, it's just a meal. For me, it's a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
Right? And I kind of envy that a little bit. This is, you can follow all these rules because the general says you can do it, or you can follow all these rules because it's the way.
So hold that idea in your mind, and let's get to the end of the story. Okay. Morgenstern awoke. Everyone with me? Yeah. He rolled his heavy head slowly to the side and saw his wife and his daughter Hannah sitting at the table in the hospital room eating their dinner. Chicken. Don't eat, was all he could manage. His wife jumped, startled, as sudden as waking. Baruch Hashem, she clapped. Blessed is the Lord who makes miracles happen every day. That's a direct quote of a bracha, right? Don't shake your head, Yankel. You have tubes in your nose. Hannah, come quick, your father is alive. His daughter approached cautiously, holding a barbecued chicken drumstick in her right hand and a half-eaten wing in her left hand. May Hashem grant you a full and speedy recovery, she mumbled in Yiddish while staring at her shoes. She spotted a piece of barbecued God on her blouse, picked it off with her greasy little fingers, and popped it in her mouth. Morgenstern groaned and passed out. Friday afternoon, He was back at home in his very own bed. He decided to put off telling his family about chicken until he was out of the hospital. He would tell them tonight, as they gathered around Shabbos table. He would speak to them the word of chicken, and thus they would be freed. Maybe jump in the car afterwards, start catch a movie. And when the sun finally set on Shabbos and it finally arrived, Morgenstern pulled himself into his wheelchair, took a deep breath, and rolled himself into the dining room. His wife had set the table with good tablecloth, the good silverware, and great good glasses. He watched her light the Shabbos candles, cover her face with her hands, and silently pray to God who wasn't there. Please hear my blessing, she prayed to nobody, in the merit of Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. She'd have a better luck with a handful of scratch, maybe some cut-up apple. She turned to him with love in her eyes. Blessed is God, she said in Yiddish. She came to him, knelt beside his wheelchair, and hugged him. I have to tell you something, he said. I know, she sobbed into the napkin. I know. I don't think you do. He rolled away from her. When I was dead, he said, I met God. We all meet God every day, said his wife. If only you know where to look. No, shouted Morgenstern. You're not listening. How do you think I got back here, he asked her. Who else but the All-Merciful would send you back to me? He could take no more. Who? Shouted Morgenstern, wheeled himself around the head of the table. I'll tell you who. The loud voices attracted the children. They all gathered slowly around the Shabbos table. Let me tell you a little something about the all-knowing. Let me tell you a little bit about your all-merciful. Morgenstern looked from Shmuel to Yonah, to Meir to Rivka, to David to Chana, to Dinah, to Leah, and to little Yitzchak. The children were all showered, their hair neatly combed and dressed for the finest Shabbos clothes. He looked at his wife. She was wearing her favorite wig. There was a picture of Yerushalayim on the wall over her right shoulder, some family pictures over her left, bar mitzvahs, weddings, last year's Seder in Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami. Children, he began. God is, he continued. He added. The light from the Shabbos candles flickered in the eyes of the children. Little Meir was wearing a brand new yarmulke and couldn't stop fidgeting with it. Shmuel held a handful of Torah notes from his rabbi he read after the meal, and the girls would be looking forward to singing their favorite Shabbos songs. God is what? Asked little Chana. He couldn't do it. God, Morgenstern said to his children, is a merciful God. His wife came to his side. He is the God of our forefathers. Blessed is God, who is his mercy restores life to the dead. The children cheered. Amen. May his name be called out in joy, they shouted, jumping up from their seats to hug him all at once. Morgenstern closed his eyes, hugged his children tightly. His wife bent over and kissed him gently on his forehead. May his kindness shine down on us forever, she whispered. She smiled then and went to go get the kitchen and brought the soup, chicken. What's the end of the story? What was his decision? What makes this story so great? What did he decide to do? Yeah. He let them be in their so-called naivete. Why? It's easier? Okay. The results are good, you said? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, their life has meaning and purpose, even if it's a noble lie. Right? Yeah, Diane.
And it also gives you a depiction that God doesn't have to be a man with a white beard and long white hair sitting on a throne in heaven. It can be a chicken.
Yeah. So this Yom Kippur, when you're fasting and you're saying Al Chet, you should be, imagine God as a chicken. And if I'm up there davening, I start hearing giggles from the land, I know exactly who it is.
As long as it's a higher source.
Yeah. Here's the truth, though, right? Here's the truth. What he's writing in a short story is exactly what all of us do every day. Now, his is severe and almost absurd, right? But that's okay. The absurd teaches us about our lives. Like, that's the point of these stories, right? It's not that God's a chicken. It's just that the God of the Bible is not the God of the Bible for us anymore. And there's still a God, even if the God's a crazy tall chicken. And he sees the love of the family, the relationships they have, the meaning and purpose that they have, right? Why shouldn't he thank the almighty chicken for bringing him back from the dead? I mean, he says, Baruch atah Hashem mechayeh hametim. Was he lying when he said that? Actually, it's probably the most truthful thing he said in the entire story because it's factual. It actually happened in the story, right? And God is merciful because God gave him back his life with his family and the love of his family. And the truth is this, right? And this is a part of the philosophy thing. We go through life with myths. Every time we make understanding about the world, it's because we're making a myth about the world. I'll give you one perfect example. Can anybody please show me where on your body your ego is? I mean, I don't go to medical school, but I teach 100 doctors a year, and I ask them all the question, when you go to gross anatomy class, do they show you where the ego is? No one can show you. Ego's a myth. It's a myth or a pattern of behavior that explains human living. The part of us that says, I'm important, and I got to take care of myself. That's a myth. Right? LeBron James is coming to the Lakers. Right? Let's hope they improve their passing game and their shooting game and their offensive game. Well, passing game, shooting game, and offensive game are myths. They explain a pattern of behavior as, a group of men move a ball down the court and throw it into a net. There's no such thing as a passing game. It's just a way that we name an experience. So when we destroy a myth, like let's say the myth of God created the world or God is this commander that has a checklist, we destroy that myth. What do we replace it with? What story are we going to tell to replace it? You could be a nihilist. That's a sad existence. Morgenstern couldn't be a nihilist. He still wants meaning in his life. So he reconstructs the myth. And even though he knows that God is a chicken and all the mitzvahs don't amount to anything, so per se, in terms of getting you a better seat in heaven, and the Bible is a joke in heaven, it's still mine. It's still me. It's still my family. And you see the hope, aspiration, dreams, love, community, and family. And the great chicken let him live. Why wouldn't he give brachas there, right? So, that is what makes this story so powerful, is that as bad and as terrible and as ridiculous as it is about Yiddishkeit, it basically acknowledges something that in a modern context, we all choose. We all choose to be Jewish. Even if you grew up in a frum Jewish house, when you're an adult, there comes a moment where you make a life choice. And we choose to be Jewish. Comments? Yes?
So, we look at the ethics of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
We know the truth. Do we have a responsibility to be that truth, speak that truth, propagate that truth, or should we, for the sake of other people's feelings,
Yeah.
what should we do? Should we see God as he really is as a chicken and go out to the world and tell the truth
Yeah.
about God? Or should we just say, let everybody be in their...
Well, what did Morgenstern do? Let me challenge truth with truth. Truth in column A, God is a chicken, and nobody cares about the Bible. And Gabriel, the great angel, is a fat man in overalls who smokes cigarettes. Truth number 2, his family loves him. And he spent one afternoon with God and a lifetime with his family. Which truth are you going to choose? He chooses the latter one. They're not. They're not mutually exclusive, right? So, anyway, that's why I love this story, right? It takes you down this path and then just turns you around. Yes, 1 and then 2, and then we're going to go on to... Got other stories to read here, folks. Yeah, please. Oh, the Chazanic story where the prince thought he was a chicken, and then the rabbi comes and gets down on the ground with him. Everyone's trying to... This kid, it's like this kid is this rich kid. He's a prince. He thinks he's a chicken. He, gets under the table. He only eats feed. He, refuses, right? And everyone knows he's a prince and thinks he's completely lost his mind. And all these scholars and psychiatrists come and they try to reason his way out of it, and it doesn't work. And the rabbi says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get this kid and then what the rabbi does is takes off his coat, takes off his shoes, and climbs under the table with the prince and starts clucking like a chicken. And over the course of time, he starts using English, whatever words, and the prince begins to follow him along. And over the course of a very long time building this relationship, eventually the prince comes back and sits at the table again and becomes a human being again. That's the story. And so the question is, it's as absurd as this one in some ways, but in some ways it's also makes some similar decisions. It's good. Yeah. Last comment.
I think maybe he's also saying that even though he feels this way, he's not going to decide for anybody else.
Yeah, it's personal to him. Yeah. Well, let's see the other stories, because some of the other stories, the barb gets twisted a little tighter, okay? Let's do It's Not Easy Being Supreme. Everyone got that one? It's page 177? Okay. Come, let us now sing out to Epstein. Let us call out in praise of the rock of salvation. Let me greet him with thanksgiving and with praise songs. Let me pray, for a great God is Epstein, and a great king above all. That's all like classic Jewish language, except, of course, the name of God is not Epstein, but in his language it is, okay? And but by the way, the God's a chicken in the story. In that story, the God's not a chicken anywhere else. That was just that story, okay? While it is true that the latest edition of Kabbalah for Dummies is an engaging and often thought-provoking introduction to the concepts of the renowned work of ancient Jewish mysticism, it might have been prudent if somewhere in the Golem section, perhaps adjacent to the detailed instructions of how to create one, they might have mentioned, however cursorily, how to uncreate one. For I am not but a mortal of dirt, of clay, of earth, into which Epstein in his great mercy did breathe life. Come, command me, Epstein, and I shall obey. Let me now praise Epstein. Amen. Have you figured out who's speaking yet? In the italics? It's the golem. That's right. And who created him? Epstein. Good. Okay. Holy crap, said Epstein. It worked. Epstein's mother clapped her hands excitedly. Ooh, make him do something, Moshe. Make him do something. The golem sat upright on Epstein's couch, his back straight, his hands clasped solemnly in front of his chest. Epstein had dressed him in one of his old blue business suits, with a wide striped tie and a dark gray fedora. He wasn't beautiful or even symmetrical, but for a first golem, he was pretty damn good. Behold, said Epstein, I command you to stand up. The golem stood up. Epstein gasped. Behold, I said, I command you to sit. The golem sat. Epstein's mother cheered. Can I try? Can I try? She thought for a moment. Behold, she said, do the laundry. The Epsteins held their breath. Hanging or folded? The golem asked. Epstein's mother squealed. This is the life, said Epstein. The plants were watered, the cat was fed, and the garbage had already been taken out. Sunday afternoon, nothing to do but just to sit back with a cold beer and watch the Jets game with his mother. Golem, Epstein called out. Here I am, said Golem. Bring me a beer. Bring unto me a beer, said it, and with it some of those chips. You know, the tall cupboard by the stove. He was sure getting to like that golem. By the way, do you hear the language? And God called out to Abraham, and Abraham said, here I am, right? Go now from your house, to, et cetera, right? Epstein is using the same language, and the golem is saying, here I am, right? Okay. Hark, cried out the golem, dost thou desire a Bex? Or dost thou desire a Samuel Adams? I desired, called out Epstein, a Samuel Adams. Amen, said the golem. Light or regular? Regular. Ale or lager? Lager. Amber or cherry wheat? Just give me a friggin' beer, said Epstein, and the golem hurried out. Sweet. What a nice boy, said Epstein's mother. A moment later, the golem returned. Barbecue chips or zesty ranch, he asked. Epstein is my shepherd. I shall not lack. In lush meadows he laid me down beside tranquil waters. He leads me, I shall dwell in the house of Epstein for all the days of my life. Epstein was 37 years old, a low-level assistant in an insignificant branch of a monolithic corporation with offices in 72 countries, including Bahrain. He was a cog in the wheel of another wheel of cogs of its own. His devoted golem may have known him as Epstein the all-powerful and omniscient, but most everyone just knew him as Epstein, the balding junior assistant to the fat guy in accounting with a lisp. And while, yes, it may have been factually true that he lived with his mother, technically speaking, his mother lived with him. A semantic loophole which never failed to impress the ladies. He couldn't just throw her out on the street. She was an old and needed his company, and he was young and needed her half of the rent. But God damn it, it was high time someone took care of Epstein for a change. It was time someone wanted Epstein's opinion. Time someone brought Epstein a coffee. Morning, Mr. Epstein. Whatever you say, Mr. Epstein. But what do you think, Mr. Epstein? Last Saturday afternoon, as part of the weekly sermon, Rabbi Teitelbaum told the congregation the story of the Golem of Prague. And by Saturday night, Epstein was already scouring the Golem section in local Barnes & Noble. It's not in sci-fi, by the way, it's in biography. One quick stop at Home Depot for a half a dozen bags of dirt, and Epstein was set. Epstein raised me from the pit of raging waters. From the slime of mud did he lift me. Praiseworthy is he who places Epstein his trust, who turns not to the strayers after falsehood. Epstein was starting to like all this thou, thee, thy, beseech stuff. Nobody beseeched him at work. Nobody praised him. Nobody sanctified his name. Most of them didn't even remember his name. The golem was a real bower. Even Epstein liked. He bowed when he entered the room. He bowed when he left the room. He bowed when he began to speak. He bowed when he stopped speaking. And he never once forgot his morning praise, a short hymn Epstein composed called Obey Me or Else. Blessed is he that begotteth you in this world, for he can surely taketh you out. But Epstein had no idea, though, how to kill a golem. Considering that they weren't technically alive, it didn't terror him too deeply. And so 2 weeks and a couple of trips back to Home Depot Garden Center later, Epstein was back in the garden, busy in creating golem number 2. Oh, so stop there for a second, right? So who is Epstein in real life? Just who's doing what? He's a golem. He doesn't have a personality. He's not like anyone special. He's just moving paper from one side of the desk to the other side of the desk so that someone else can move it from that desk to another desk. And that's it. He can't even afford rent. He's got to live with his mother so he can afford rent. Okay? It's a golem making a golem. We start seeing how this is, wonder how this is going to end up. Ever see The Sorcerer's Apprentice from Fantasia? Okay. Epstein had discovered the first time around, despite what Kabbalah for Dummies said, creation was really more of a two-man job. Sure, you might be able to pull it off by yourself. Others famously had, of course, but they'd obviously cut corners. To begin with, the bags of dirt were really heavy, 50 pounds each of the appropriate named Miracle Grow garden soil. And you need at least a dozen of them for a golem of even modest size. Then you had to shape the dirt into something resembling a man, which sounds a lot easier than it is, particularly if you're going for the whole in-your-own-image thing, which Kabbalah for Dummies advised against, while still acknowledging it's kind of the fun part. Golem 1 had turned out well enough and even looked a little like Epstein. Medium height, bit of a gut. That must have been the beginner's luck, though, because Epstein had hell of a time with legs on Golem 2, and he kept screwing up the head. He wasn't very good at heads. "Come on, Ma," he said, "I need a hand with this one." He found her downstairs in the laundry room, an angry scowl on her face, her foot tapping impatiently on the laundry room floor while a tall pile of laundry sat stinking. The golem was bent over the dryer, writing notes in yet another one of his thick black notebooks. He carried those notebooks everywhere, recording in every great detail every Epsteinian rule and regulation. In the few short weeks since his creation, he'd filled 7 of them from cover to cover. There was an entire volume on beer, 2 on the complex subject of chips and resalted snacks, another tractate on the laws of house cleaning, while still another catechized the full care and feeding of house plants and window boxes. Container plants demanded a volume all on their own. When he wasn't writing in them, he was consulting from them. The covers were already worn, the pages already withered and loose. "Hark!" cried out the golem. "When thou say detergent, art thou referring to powdered detergent or liquid detergent?" "Liquid," snapped Epstein's mother. The golem wrote it down. "How about those detergent discs?" he asked. "We don't have detergent discs." "Shall I get detergent discs?" "Liquid is fine." "Tide or whisk?" "Tide." "What about Fab?" "No." "Gain?" Epstein's mother shook her head. "Tide with the bleach alternative or Tide with bleach ultra?" "We don't have Tide with bleach ultra." "Shall I get Tide with bleach ultra?" She groaned. "What the hell's wrong with him, Moshe?" "Give him some time," said Epstein. "To him, time must be given," said the golem, turning on a blank page of his notebook. "Now then, lay flat or tumble dry." Mrs. Epstein slammed the washer shut and stormed out of the room. "Delicate or permanent press?" the golem called out after her. He ran to the doorway, clutching his precious notebook to his chest. "Delicate or permanent press?" All right, so what's the golem like?
He's trying to obey it, figure out what all the rules are and obey them. He's not thinking for himself.
Yeah, and what's he writing them in? He's writing in a book, series of book, dare I say tractates, of the law that Epstein has given them. Who is he? Yeah, he's Moshe. He's Moshe Rabbeinu. He's Moses the prophet. Or he's one of the rabbis of the Talmud who's trying to figure out exactly what God wants from him by writing book after book after book after book of the text, right?
But he's not doing anything. He's not doing the work.
Oh, you're learning. You're learning, aren't you? Okay.
She's not.
Not actually doing the work. He's just thinking and trying to figure out what the God wants from me without actually doing the thing. Okay. This all I know, that Epstein is with me. When Epstein acts in strict justice, I will still praise the word. When Epstein acts in mercy, I still praise the word. In Epstein I have trusted, I shall not fear. This place is a wreck, Epstein's mother said. It had been 2 weeks since the Golem's creation and well over a month since Golem 1's. The plants hadn't been watered, the cat hadn't been fed, and the garbage hadn't been taken out. Neither Golem was doing very much at these days, stuck as they were in near constant debate about the meaning and intricacies of the inference of Epstein's instructions and commands. Epstein clearly said to separate whites and colors, said Golem 1. I don't disagree with that, said Golem 2. I disagree with how you interpret the word colors. You hold that any amount of color constitutes color, whereas I hold that if it's a significant amount of color to mean the word color. The pile of soiled clothing in the center of the laundry room had already doubled in size. Dirty linens were piled high in the sink. Underwear hung from every doorknob and light switch. Epstein's mother's beige underwire bras were slung sloppily over the top of the laundry room door. But what is a significant amount of color? Asked Golem 1. Golem 2 cited Notebook 4, page 42, of Epstein's laws concerning the taking out of garbage, wherein the garbage being significantly fully meant that the lid could not be closed. According to Golem 2, significant therefore meant a majority, a preponderance of. Golem 1 argued that garbage was a different ruling entirely because it's dependent on the day of the week. That is, the time the garbage was picked up, not on the amount of the garbage, as was the issue in the case of the dirty laundry. Epstein separated the whites from the colors, himself filled the washing machine, and slammed the door and left. The golems fell to their knees and begged for forgiveness. Behold, before you I am like a vessel filled with shame and humiliation. May it be your will, O Epstein, that I not sin again. And then one Sunday afternoon, after watering the plants, feeding the cat, and taking out the garbage, Epstein barely had enough time to sit back without his cold beer to catch the last lousy couple of minutes of the Jets game with his mother. When the golems came in, they joined them in the den. Epstein's mother left without a word. No, Epstein shouted at the television, go for the field goal. Yes, yes, agreed Golem 1, the field goal is what they should go for. We should all go for the field goal, Golem 2 concurred. By going for the field goal, added Golem 1, we will all be rewarded. It was a 3rd and long, with less than 2 minutes to play, and the Jets were only down by 1 point. You never pass on 3rd and long, said Epstein. Passing on 3rd and long is wrong, said Golem 2. He who passes on 3rd and long, said Golem 1, shall surely be put to death. The quarterback dropped back, faked left, reared back, and threw the ball into the end zone. It's up, said Epstein. Touchdown! He shouted for his seat. Woohoo! In your face! Epstein raised his arms above his head and turned the double high five the golems, who remained sitting as ever solemnly in their seats. Touchdown, nodded Golem 1 sagely. Amen, agreed Golem 2, scribbling away in his notebook. In their face. Okay, so the golems, who do they become? They become 2 rabbinic Jews arguing over Gemara, Talmud, about what God wants for them, and is the work actually getting done? No. Okay. We're almost at the end of the story. Rabbi Teitelbaum peeked through his living room window and unlocked the front door. Epstein, he said, how's your mother? The rabbi led Epstein into his study and closed the door. I have a problem, said Epstein. Yes, yes, said Rabbi Teitelbaum. He stood by the window, looking out at his cars in the driveway and stroking his long silvery beard. After some polite small talk about the situation in Israel and the paltry synagogue building fund, I don't know what that's like, Epstein confessed, and then despite the repeated cautions, he had kind of sort of made himself a golem. 2, actually. It seemed like a good idea at the time. I'm just so busy, with mother and, life these days. Yes, yes, said Rabbi Teitelbaum, with the multitasking and the emails. Yeah. He seemed to be keeping an eye on his cars in the driveway. Epstein continued. The golems had been a serious bother. He felt awful saying so, being their creator and all, but didn't Nobel regret creating dynamite? Didn't Einstein regret creating the bomb? And so he decided to get rid of them, which, much like the creation part, was turning out to be more difficult than it sounded. He'd gone to the library, he checked the internet, but he could not only find information anywhere on how to undo what he had so regrettably, short-sightedly, foolishly done twice. Rabbi Teitelbaum nodded sagely. Yes, the Google knows many things. He stepped away from the window and sat down at his desk. Unfortunately, I can't help you. There was a knock at the door. You see, said Rabbi Teitelbaum, leaning forward his vise, I've kind of sort of got a little golem problem of my own. Door opened and the golem walked in. He looked different, this golem. Looked a lot like Rabbi Teitelbaum, tall, thin, lanky, with a noticeable stoop in his back. Epstein thought the rabbi may have had a bit of generous with the clay in the crotch area, but overall it was an impressive effort. Nice job, said Epstein. Teitelbaum is my shepherd, cried out the golem. I shall not lack. In lush meadows he laid me down, besides tranquil waters he leads me. Rabbi Teitelbaum shrugged. It seemed like a good idea at the time, he said. That crying out things get old fast, doesn't it? Hark, cried out the golem. Where thou sat to change the oil in thy car, art thou referring to minivan or the sedan? The rabbi shook his head. The sedan. Amen, said the golem. Regular or synthetic? Regular. 10W40 or 10W30? Rabbi Teitelbaum sighed. Just change the oil. When Epstein returned from the rabbi's house, his mother was waiting for him at the end of the driveway. They're killing each other, she screamed. The house was a wreck. The dining room table had been flipped over, and the 2 wooden chairs had been smashed in the living room. Couch cushions were torn open and the glass coffee table had been shattered. What the heck is going on? They were arguing, said Epstein's mother. Loud shouts and slaps came from the den. Glass shattered. Not the television, cried Epstein. They ran through the house. The kitchen had been trashed and the cutlery drawer had been pulled open. The knives were scattered all over the floor. But it was nothing compared to what they found waiting for them in the den. Oh my God, said Epstein. Golem 1 looks up and says, oh, you what? Golem 1 was lying on the floor in front of the couch, trying to reach for his legs, both of which had been cut off at the hip, evidently by Golem 2. His right leg was slung over his arm on the far side of the couch, and his left leg was halfway across the room underneath an overturned end table. Golem 2 wasn't faring much better. He was lying flat in the back in the middle of his room, trying to get to his arms, both of which had been cut off at the shoulder, evidently by Golem 1. His right arm was lying on Epstein's feet. His left arm was across the room, sticking out from behind the television. He clearly meant to water the plants every day, Golem 2 said loudly to Golem 1. I don't disagree with you, Golem 1 answered loudly back, throwing a copy of TV Guide at Golem 2's head. I disagree with your understanding of plants to mean all plants, even those which may not need watering every day, such as the ivy or the little cactus on the window ledge in the kitchen. Not that it mattered, of course. The plants all died weeks ago. The golems needed constant supervision. Golem 2, having no arms, needed Epstein to wash him, clothe him, and feed him. Golem 2 wanted a Coke. Epstein not only had to get it for him, Epstein had to hold it for him while he drank. Golem 1, having no legs, needed to be carried to the toilet and carried off the toilet, carried to the dinner table and carried to the den to watch TV. Epstein, Golem 2 would call out. Hark, Epstein would answer. Have you mercy upon your servant, he would say, and bring unto me a beer and some chips, added Golem 1, in thy mercy. So a few weeks later, Epstein awoke in the middle of the night and helped his mother into the car, threw their bags in the trunk. Forget this, proclaimed Epstein, and away they went. Over the next 2 weeks, the golem called out for Epstein every morning and every afternoon and every evening, but Epstein did not respond. Golem 1 wrote notes on small pieces of paper, begging Epstein for forgiveness and salvation, and stuck them in the cracks between the bricks in the living room wall. Golem 2 found a prayer book for Yom Kippur, beat himself on the chest and prayed, How long, Epstein, will you continue to forget us? How long will you hide your countenance from us? The last of the plants withered and died. The cat starved, and the garbage piled high on the living room floor. Okay, end of the allegory, right? So who are the golems and who is Epstein? Epstein is God. Golems are Jews. And what is the problem when a Jew becomes a golem? Forgot where they come from. They forgot the meaning and purpose of their life, and they just argue over the meaning of what God says to them. And in the end, God went away. And what did Golem 1 do? He goes to the living room wall and shoves little prayers in it. And what did Golem 2 do? He goes to the shul and davens Yom Kippur and asks God to come back, Epstein to come back. Right? This is Auslander at his best, right? He knows what all of us expect and just completely flips it on his head. Right? The moral of the story, of course, is don't be a golem. Right? Comments, questions? No, not as deep as the other one, but, still on the nose, I should say. All right, what time is it? Should we do one more? Got time for one more? Yeah, all right. Who knows Kafka? Ever read Kafka? Ever went to high school? Right, so what happens to Gregor What happens to Gregor? Gregor is the name of the main character in the Metamorphosis by Kafka. All right, he wakes up in the morning and he's a cockroach. And he's lying on his back and he can't figure out how to flip over, and then he spends the rest of the time like wondering how the heck he became a cockroach. Right? And just dealing with the fact that he's a cockroach now. Right? It's one of these. It's the classic absurdist Kafka. And it's about the modern condition of just finding yourself and life is absurd. Okay? So keep that in mind. Keep the structure of that in mind as we read the Metamorphosis. And close it out. As Moti awoke one morning from impure dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a very large goy. Right? He's a Gentile, suddenly. Which to the frum Jew is probably not much, whatever. Okay. In his waking half-sleep, he lazily scratched his hairy chest. Hairy? He threw back the covers. His chest became broad and muscular. A thick coat of black curly hair spread across it and trailed down his stomach. His newly muscular arms and shoulders felt huge in his tank top. Moti didn't remember owning a tank top, certainly not one that said Budweiser across the chest. Awesome. He moved his heavy arms up and down, watching the muscles expanding and contracting, but suddenly taut skin. Beginning on his shoulder and extending down his arm was an elaborate tattoo of a blonde woman in a bikini straddling a large sword that rested on the eye socket of a bloody skull. He was overcome with the desire to build something with hammers and wood. All right, so Moti, of course, is probably one of these Crown Heights Jews, right, who spends all day in yeshiva. He's probably quite thin or whatever. And now he woke up and he's... Right, exactly. He was overcome with the desire to build something with hammers and wood. He ran to his mirror. From the neck up, nothing had changed. He was still Moti. From the neck down, he was burly, construction worker. It gave the effect of some of the experimental head reassignment surgery gone terribly wrong. In addition to the tank top, he was wearing a red and black flannel plaid shirt, buttoned only to the chest, and faded denim jeans, torn at the knees hung with a yellow and black Stanley tape measure marked contractor grade. Moti unzipped the jeans and looked inside his black underwear. Black underwear? Oh, so that's a foreskin. It occurred to Moti that somewhere out there was a once burly, previously uncircumcised construction person running around with the body of an 18-year-old Lubavitcher yeshiva student. But, thought Moti, that's his problem. He stopped himself. No, that's his friggin' problem. Nice. There was a loud rapping at his bedroom door. You're going to be late for shul, his mother said. Moti, he completely forgot it was Shabbos. Moti swung the door open. Ta-da! Moti's massive, goyish body filled the doorway. His mother's mouth dropped open in a silent scream. Her eyes rolled backward in her head, her eyelids fluttered, and she fell face first onto the hard bedroom floor. She was out cold. Moti lifted her up and carried her to the bedroom. He put her in the bed, installed some ceramic tile in the master bath, and then left for shul. With his goyish legs and powerful stride, it took him only half his usual time to reach the shul, but he was still walking in the middle of the rabbi's mid-service sermon, and everyone turned. Who dares to walk in the middle of this rabbi's speech? Their faces all seemed to ask. A tall shegitz, that's a Yiddish word, not very nice word for a non-Jewish man, in jeans, wearing a yarmulke and a tallis, was not the answer they were expecting. The chief rabbi motioned to the cantor, who motioned to the assistant rabbi, who hurried down the aisle to the man in jeans and motioned him to please come outside. Are you a guest or a friend of a current shul member? Asked the assistant rabbi. Moti explained it all simply and directly as possibly could. He was Moti Aronson. He had awakened as a goy, and as simply as that, but clearly it was a matter of biology, not of belief, and he didn't think it would change anyone's opinion of him. Moti asked that he please be allowed inside so not to miss any more of the services. The assistant rabbi kindly asked that Moti leave the premises before he was forced to call the police. The doors opened, and Rabbi Epstein and Rabbi Akiva stepped outside. A discussion ensued. The central question, it seemed, was whether Moti was to be considered kosher or treif. Moti explained that he should be allowed to enter the shul because religion is based on belief, which is a fundamental function of thought, which is a function of your brain, which is located in your head. So Moti observed that his head was more important than the body. The assistant rabbi disagreed. When God prohibits the bringing of the flesh of an unfit animal into the temple, he specifically says flesh. Why? Because God is telling us no matter how pure the thoughts of a pig might be, his body is still what it matters most. We learn from this that the body matters more than the head. Moti's body was prohibited from entering the shul. The assistant rabbi declared, however, if they were to cut off Moti's head, they would certainly be permitted to carry it inside. Rabbi Epstein shook his head. Even if we knew for certain, he said, that a pig had only pure thoughts, and that pig believed with the whole heart, the Holy One, blessed be he, the ancient rabbis still forbid us to eat it. Thus, Rabbi Epstein said, irrespective of whether they could allow Moti into the synagogue, they were without question prohibited from eating him. That's utterly ridiculous, argued Rabbi Akiba. If the pig believed in Hashem, as it is written, with all your heart, with all your might, and with all your mind, the ancient rabbis would certainly deem a pig kosher. Therefore, according to Rabbi Akiba, they could not bring Moti into the synagogue, but they could probably eat him. And so it was decided. Moti, the assistant rabbi, called out, but Moti had already gone. His mother was still not awakened. He regretted having frightened her so, and decided to prepare Shabbos lunch for the family so he could rest a bit longer. He was also built a second level to the deck, installed some landscaping, lighting, and for entertaining. He was in the kitchen preparing a kugel tray when he heard his father come through the front door, speaking loudly with a number of familiar voices. I'm in the kitchen, Moti called out. He recognized that other voices belonging to Rabbi Breyer and Rabbi Falkenstein. He didn't see you outside the shul, his father was saying, so the three men stopped in the kitchen and froze at the sight of him. Moti tried to explain. I woke up like this. Shegitz, Moti's father spat. I'm not a shegitz, said Moti. I'm your son. Moti, listen. It's just some kind of miracle, a Shabbos miracle. I don't know how or why it happened, but I can't see why it should make you feel any different. Moti's father smashed him across the face with the Talmud Bavli. That's the Talmud. The oversized hardcover book caught Moti just below the left eye, and he fell to the floor. Treif, yelled his father. You dare to touch our food with your goyish hands, you anti-Semitic. He raised the Talmud up to strike the hideous creature again, but Rabbi Breyer and Rabbi Falkenstein intervened. A discussion ensued. Rabbi, asked Moti's father, should not a father correct his son? It is not written, teach them to your children and their children after them. Rabbi Breyer explained that while the Torah certainly encourages the hitting of no good, rotten child, if the child is treif, you are forbidden from hitting the child with a holy book. He suggested that they strike Moti again, only this time with a leather belt, or perhaps a flat piece of unholy wood. Rabbi Falkenstein disagreed. Are we not commanded to make for yourself a gate of the Torah? Could that not be interpreted as permission to use the Torah for your own defense? And it is not that the best defense is a good offense? Rabbi Breyer concurred, but added that if possible, the blow should be concentrated on the head and face, which they knew for certain to be kosher. Rabbi Falkenstein praised Moti's father for never once hitting his son below the neck, and they all agreed that Moti's father was obligated to continue pummeling Moti with this sacred book. They shook hands, and Rabbi Breyer handed Moti's father the Talmud. Moti, his father cried out, but Moti had already gone. He was on his way to his yeshiva, hoping that at least a few friends would accept him. He already knew that the incident at shul probably wouldn't be allowed inside the building, so he stood outside and shouted up at the dormitory window. Yitzi, Yoyo, Yankel! They all came outside to meet him. Moti offered Yankel a handshake, but Yankel held his hands up. Treif, Yankel explained. Come on, guys, check it out, said Moti, pulling his sleeve to show him his tattoo. When he flexed his biceps, the woman's sword seemed to dance. You've been thinking about getting more ink done. Maybe on my back, eagle wings or something? Yitzi stepped forward. Moti, it's a big question of if we can still be friends. A discussion ensued. Yitzi explained that he was basing his reasoning on the prohibition from Deuteronomy. Do not intermarry with them, for they will turn unto their gods. If marrying was not allowed, Yitzi put forth, can we not also assume ipso facto that friendship too is prohibited? Yoel disagreed. He pointed out that the greater commandment to love your neighbor as you love yourself specifically avoids saying whether neighbor is Jewish or not Jewish. Why? To show us that when it comes to human acts of kindness, such a friendship, religious orientation is of no consequence. According to Yoel, the friendship wasn't merely allowed, it was obligatory. I think I skipped it. There it is. Okay. Yankel agreed. On the contrary, he said, when Hashem commands us to go to Canaan, he says, and you shall drive them out with your midst and destroy their idols and images. What do we learn from this? That not only are we forbidden to be friends with Moti, it is incumbent upon us to kill him. Yes, agreed Yitzi, with a sword. Baruch Hashem, said Yoel, checking his pockets for a sword. Moti, he called out, looking around. But Moti had already gone back home. He decided he would just leave, go somewhere else, even when his body was Jewish. He'd often suspected that his mind was not. He could find a place in the city, transfer to NYU, maybe take a film class. He could find people who would love him for who he was, not for who he was no longer. When Moti got home, he was met by several officers of the Rockland County Sheriff's Department. They wanted to question him in his connection with the death of his mother. "May I quickly use the bathroom?" Moti asked. Officer Landry felt that they should not allow him to use the bathroom, asked Sergeant, and specifically commanded them to apprehend the suspect. "Yes," argued Officer McKenna, "but it is not written to protect and serve?" In the living room, the rabbis were debating whether Moti would be punished as a Jew who kills another Jew or a non-Jew who kills a Jew. Moti walked past, went upstairs, tied a rope tightly around the part of his body where the Jewish part met the Goyish part, and quietly hung himself in the shower. Moti sat up in heaven and looked down on his funeral taking place below. A black hearse led the procession, followed closely by his father's beige minivan and black Lincoln town car full of rabbis. They drove all the way to the gates of Zion Cemetery in Spring Valley, where they stopped at said gates by the chief of security. There seemed to be some confusion. A rabbi from the cemetery office came hurrying down to his gates. His name was Rabbi Perlstein. Rabbi Perlstein was of the opinion that Moti's body could not be buried in a Jewish cemetery because it had a tattoo. Though if they were to cut his head off, it would be permissible just to bury that. A discussion ensued. Moti laughed. Moti's father looked around. Who was laughing? Moti, he called out, but Moti had already gone. Okay. Now, it's a little sad, but if you take the death out of it as the sad part, because he just wanted to, almost like Tom Sawyer, like look at his own funeral, right? So, yeah, Diane.
It begs the question, how do we accept others who are not like us?
Exactly right.
Just like last week at the lecture, it really got to me when that woman talked about not wanting to build homeless apartments for the homeless in people's own neighborhood. That most people don't want an apartment for the homeless next to them. I mean, as Jews, aren't we accepting everyone?
Well, I think that the question is, right, so the gist is Moti became a non-Jew. Now, replace the big burly body and the tattoo with something else. Let's say he was gay, right? Or let's say he didn't want to go to yeshiva. He wanted to go to NYU and make movies, right? Or he didn't want to keep kosher. Just pick one thing that breaks a community norm. Right? Now, of course, who is Moti in this story? It's the author. Right? This is probably the most autobiographical part of the story. Right? He woke up one morning and realized he was either gay or that he just didn't want to be part of the Orthodox community anymore. And yet he still wanted to go to shul, or he still wanted to be around with his friends, and his friends couldn't know what to do with him. And so he left. Right? I mean, it seems sad, and I mean, that's how, remember, he's the Russia. He's the bitter one, right? He's the evil one. So he's going to be like that. Well, is there a positive thing we can learn out of the story? Is there anything positive we can learn out of this story? Okay, so there's like the altar message, right? The message of the story is he woke up to be someone who's like a construction worker, right? Not accepted by his community. The community debated 3 different times whether to cut his head off and maybe just like be with his head because his head is somehow kosher and the rest of him is treif, right? So that's the negative. The positive part of the story is that, Moti left. I think that's, to me, is like the most interesting part, is that right when the discussion looks like it was about to end and they looked for him, he was gone. And he tried to find life and love in one place and in another place. And then he ended up going up to heaven. And when they started talking about his body and cutting off the head of his body in the 4th instance, he was laughing, and then what happened? It says he was gone. I don't know what that means, but he decided to exit the community. So that's that story, right? And that to me is very autobiographical for him, right? In some ways, maybe we should have read that story first and did the chicken story last, because the chicken story has the most redeeming message, right? Sorry about that. I guess I just chose in the wrong order. But so that's Shalom Auslander. He has whole books like this, He knows all the Jewish stuff, right? He knows the Talmud. the English is really just some translations of classic Jewish language, right? The prayer life, etc. And he's bitter about this, the calcification of Jewish law. And the community that seems so inwardly focused that they end up debating whether their best friend, they can cut their head off of their best friend because the head is kosher but the body is not. Right? So take the Jewish part out from a minute and just talk about society. I think a lot of us are that way too. A lot of us can fall into that.
This author has quite an imagination.
Oh, doesn't he? Well, just read one about Charlie Brown. Yeah, there's a whole story in here about Charlie Brown. Not reading it for you tonight. You can read it yourself. Anyway, so when I was asked to you're supposed to choose a book, I'm like, here's a book probably most of the Jews in my community haven't read, but is incredibly insightful and incredibly offensive at the same time, and which means it's totally worth reading in the summer. So that's what I have to say about it. There's nothing, I told you, this is not a deep philosophical discussion, although there's some really deep, meaningful stuff in some of this. It was just meant to have a fun summer evening together. And from this book, again, if I'm up there on Rosh Hashanah and I hear we're doing the Al-Chetz and I hear people giggling, I'll look over at you guys because I know that you're probably thinking that we're praying to a chicken. So, okay. Shana Tova to everyone. Have a